It goes downhill from here.
Oh yeah.
Okay, that's a show for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in.
Welcome back to the Aviation RC Noob Podcast. You found us. My name is Joe.
And I'm Matt.
We're here to be with you along your journey and to share our experiences in RC aviation. If you have any questions, thoughts, or want to share a flight story, hit us up at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Now, buckle in. Let's take off. And we're back. This is episode 28. Today we'll be talking about modern trainers, a continuation of our trainers conversation series. Nice. And just preface a little bit, if Matthew and I seem a little extra giggly this episode, we've been hanging out for about 2 hours before we ever got started really recording.
My God.
Just having a good time. So
yeah, we've been talking about everything under the sun and back again. Mm-hmm. Good stuff. All good stuff. And it's also starting to get late at this point, so this is when the giggles come in. Hopefully you'll have as much fun as we do.
Yeah.
All right, yeah, so we're going to talk about the trainers, right? And we're going to talk about what we've been doing in the last couple of weeks. By the time this gets released, we'll have had a build night. Hopefully you came out and joined us on Discord, right? Other than that, I mean, my thought is let's just get in it.
Yeah.
What do you say, Joe?
I'm good with that. I can go ahead and then with what I've been doing, because I've not had a ton. Okay. I know it's becoming sort of my go-to statement at this point.
Well, like you've had a lot of big projects, and this past week, the past couple weeks, you've had some things that are extraordinary. So let's talk about it.
Well,
it's part of the hobby, man.
It's part of life. So without going too deep into it, my wife's back went out on her this last weekend. So I've been home and kind of trying to take care of her, take care of that, which would have been, prime opportunity to do some stuff, but also a bit of a funk kicks in when your better half is not feeling great. So,
yeah, man.
But been taking care of her, and that's been nice. Just be able to be home a few extra days with her, and so. But things that I have been working on, I've ordered a battery charger and batteries, so I can when I get them in, I can finish the last little bit of work on the Corsair and get it in the air.
Yeah,
for its maiden. But again, I didn't have a battery charger, so I'm waiting for that to come in. Then I'll be able to hopefully put the power pod into the Corsair, balance it out, make sure all the electronics are working properly, and then get that in the air.
Wait, how long do I have to build the Corsair?
What, to maiden it at the same time as me?
Yeah.
A couple days. I mean, that's if I get out to fly it this weekend.
Okay, good. No, that's good. I'm kidding around, honestly. But,
no, you're good.
But that's pretty exciting. I'm excited for you to be able to get that up in the air and give it a try.
Yeah, and truthfully, as fast as you build, you probably could have one knocked out in time.
I could if I put my mind to it. Problem is I like to squirrel, as we'll talk about in a little bit.
Mm-hmm. So once I can get the battery charger here, and I ordered 2 4-cell batteries, I'll be able to put the power pod in and get everything balanced out, make sure all the electronics are set up correctly, because I got the elevator and rudder fixed. I talked about that last time. So I'll be able to get it in the air. I've had the Depron wing out there in the garage.
I saw that.
So I've gone in and not done a ton with it, but figured out where I wanted to put the Elevon servos for that.
Mm-hmm.
And so I've already cut the holes for them size to the servos. I didn't want to glue them in yet because I want to skin the plane before I fully mount those in.
And what do you mean by skin? Are you using just like putting the Depron skin over top of it and closing it up, or are you talking about like putting coloring or paper skin or something?
I'm putting some basically metallic tape or aluminum tape on it.
Oh,
And this goes back to the bedroom project. I thought I was going to need a lot more of that aluminum tape used to put the underlay down or to join the
okay.
underlay. So I
Yeah.
bought like 5 rolls of the tape and I used less than 1 roll. So I've got all this
Oh,
silver aluminum tape in the garage. And I said,
oh
you know
man.
what? I'll use it as a covering. So I've put a few strips on the wing so far, working on doing the cover. And I taped and covered one of the vertical fins that are on it. So I still got to do another one, and then I got to put all the tape elsewhere, and
Nice.
then I can get servos mounted. And I know I'm going to have to run. I'm going to have to cut servo leads or servo extensions
Yeah.
for the wing because of how far out I put those servos. So I get to look
Mm-hmm.
forward to finally crimping my own servo extenders.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Um, and figuring that I'm rather run all those wires externally, I've figured out, I've cut holes for the servos, but my wing is thin enough that the servo goes all the way through.
Yeah.
I made a real low profile on that wing shape, so
That's sounds like it. That's all
so
right. It'll fly
I'll
good.
I'll put the servo through, and then the wire will run under the wing a couple inches, and I'll have another hole where the servo lead will go through.
Okay. Like an
And then
access panel kind of deal.
yeah, and I'll kind of wall fish it.
Yep.
Poor term, but appropriate.
It is.
I'll wall fish it through the body to the central to the center where I'll have another hole that'll bring it down into the power pod.
That sounds good.
So yeah, that's sort of where I've been on that.
My only advice on that, based on my experience so far with that. Now, this is the Depron one, right?
Yes,
Are you stiffening the body up or the control surfaces at all?
I am. So I have
Okay.
I meant to mention I did skin one of the Elevons, and before I skinned it, I took I was hoping one barbecue skewer would be long enough, but it wasn't. So I
Yeah.
took 2 barbecue skewers and I've hot glued those to the top of the
Okay, good. I
and
mean, the one might still be enough to stiffen it where you wouldn't notice any
mhm.
deflection from whatever's left. I just know that that was something that I noticed when I built mine. And again, I didn't use any stiffeners at all. And I knew that that would be potentially a problem,
Yeah,
and I'm glad that what I did can help inform you about how you build yours, because I really enjoyed the flight characteristics. I enjoyed the Depron model, putting it together, all that stuff. Um, and I think if I had built in a little bit of stiffening, I'd still be flying it right now. But I haven't gotten back to it to do what you're doing, which is, adding the barbecue screws in the right spots.
right. I don't expect to be able to pull like serious maneuvers with this one, largely because I I didn't do a lot of internal stiffening, so I don't expect it to handle extreme bank and yank real well. Like I don't I
Sure.
you know I didn't,
You don't need it to.
but it's yeah, I'm putting barbecue skewers on the Elevons, and so I'm gluing
Okay.
them down, and then I'm laying my aluminum tape on top of and under that control surface. So like basically topping and bottom, it's just going to be silver sheeted.
Okay.
Um,
Good. On the top, and we'll get into my experience with the Prandtl wing. I recommend that you have some compression members on the top.
okay, define that.
Basically, again, a barbecue skewer across the center 10 inches or whatever it
Okay,
is, above the spar. So that way, when the spar tends to flex inward on a high G maneuver,
that'll
that
fold the plane in half.
that right, it will fold the plane in half if you don't have something to basically absorb that energy
Hmm.
there. And you just put it over top of the spar and dig it in and glue it just okay, and you'll be fine.
Hmm.
Just I didn't do that on the Depron wing, and I didn't notice a big issue with the Depron, but I did notice that if I did a couple high G maneuvers, I could have an issue. The Prandtl D did have a similar kind of issue, and it's the
Hmm.
same kind of deal. Not enough reinforcing in the right spots. Top and bottom of the spar near the center is really where you need it.
Hmm.
All right, go ahead. Finish up. I'm sorry.
Um, Well, that's about what I got there.
Okay.
Now this weekend, I had a great uncle, one great.
Hmm.
It was my grandfather's brother. Um,
That'd be your great uncle.
yeah, he was in town from way up north. I only could see him once every couple of years, and he wanted to come by and see me. So my parents brought him by, and they happened to have my cousin's son with them. So
Yeah. Oh, cool.
my what I don't know what you call your cousin's son,
Nephew, second nephew once removed. I don't know.
well, something. So he was there, and like he's like 8 or 10, and
Okay.
then my grandfather's brother, so he's like 80 something, and both of them. Yeah, I was working out in the garage, and they saw that I had the planes out there in various, stages of completion. So I got to stand there and talk to them about them a little bit, and uh,
Cool.
seeing a little Jack, who's my cousin's son, you know, leaping to conclusions and trying to understand how, like, what the planes were doing and how the control surfaces, and I was explaining what they were doing, and so he's very rapidly like trying to tell me what they're doing in response and how it works.
Yeah.
And, okay, well, yeah, almost, but not quite. It's not the ones on the wings that are causing it to go up and down. It's the one on the tail. The wings roll it side to side, and
Right.
just
Yeah. Cool.
explaining and having that with him. And I don't know, maybe I'll be able to take him out and have him on the buddy box sometime. He seemed interested,
Yeah.
you know. And then just my great uncle, who is aware of the balsa side of the hobby, from when he
Yeah.
saw
Way
the
back.
stuff years ago, but he never did anything with it. But just him seeing what I was working on, and his interest, and he was
Nice.
largely quiet but also interested. It was just good to share the hobby a little bit, even if I didn't have anything to fly at the moment.
Yeah. It definitely is one of those things when people who you didn't expect to have an interest kind of come by and say, "Oh, what's that?" And they are genuinely interested in what the kind of nonsense we do.
Mm-hmm.
It's a lot of fun. A lot of fun to be able to share it.
Yeah.
Nice. That sounds like a
Um,
good time.
it was. So what have you been working on?
Me, I've been busy with probably four projects. The J1000, I did a little bit with the servos to kind of get it ready to be able to. I'm kind of, I don't know. I'm kind of holding back a minute as I try to figure out how I'm going to mount the the motors. But other than that, I mean, I'm still working on that. I realized I need to put some sort of trussing, so some sort of triangles in the front shoes, for lack of a better way, to pontoons, I guess,
Okay.
to make sure that they're a lot stiffer. Because when it goes wrong, it noses in hard, and those shoes or those boats take the impact completely.
Mm-hmm.
And so I wanted to make them stiffer so that at least it has a chance to get into the air before that damages so much that it destroys the flight characteristics of the flying elevator in the front. So I'm more doing a lot of mental work on that than physical work on that project, but I plan on getting back to that. In the meantime, for the last couple weeks since our talk with Red Jensen, I told you I was pretty inspired, and I was able to put together my modified Prandtl D wing. So basically, using the Prandtl D principles and cross sections and twists and all that kind of stuff to create a less swept, um, straighter kind of a plank style wing.
Okay.
And I was able to send it into the air at least twice since then. Um, that was not necessarily an easy journey because it didn't just leave the hand and go. Um, but when it did get in the air, to me, it was majestic. It was like controlling a bird. It was like flying a bird. The project displayed the Prover Shaw tendencies that we talked about. The point of designing that Prandtl D was to couple the roll with the positive yaw, in the Prover Shaw situation, as well as, and I don't know how, if it was the most efficient wing, with the constant the minimal drag design.
Right.
And I imagine so it may not have been like optimal, but I was using um, a quadcopter motor um, on a 3-cell battery. It was I think a 1700 kV 22 or 2306 quadcopter motor with a 5x3x5 blade. Actually, no, I ended up changing it to a 6x4, but both of them work. And really just 2 servos and a lot of weight up front. I had a 2200 milliamp 3-cell battery up front, as well as a 1300 3-cell for ballast.
Mm-hmm.
And those were sticking off the front of the nose, so they were pretty far forward. They were like half on, both of them. But once I got it in the air, I mean, it flew beautifully, and it flew pretty level. And I was worried, like as I'm flying around, I figured worst comes to worst, I can bank and yank it like a regular flying wing. But this, you just rolled a little bit, and it would start to bring the outside wing around on its own. So it was doing the Proverse yaw, and then I was worried that as it flies around, and I flew it around for I think about 7 or 8 minutes on the 2200 milliamp battery, which is about right. And honestly, it seemed like it was a little bit longer than I was thinking it would be up there. And I
Right.
didn't really drain a ton of the battery either. I just used a little bit of the battery. I think when it came down, it was like 3.8 from full charge. So I kind of used like half the battery. And when I came down, I was worried that as I came in, I wouldn't be able to yaw because it would be too low. I'd dip a wing and it would strike the ground. And then of course, what kind of landing is that? Well, what I found was just a little bit of yaw, a little bit of roll would correct the yaw. So you could basically wiggle down the field by just slight movements. And because there's I think a 6 or 8 degree upward angle from the ground.
Okay.
Like each side is lifted up a little bit
Okay.
to create a dihedral. Because when the one wing would start to turn flat, it would already be doing its yawing action. So at no point while I was trying to bring it down was it in real danger of striking the ground, because there was enough Proverse yawing action to correct for any kind of side slip or anything. And of course it has no tail, so you're not really getting any cross breeze while you're landing because there's nothing to catch the wind.
Right.
It's just the wing. And honestly, that was one of the hardest parts is as it got out further, it turned into a sliver. It was literally just you're watching a line if you could find it. And it was more, I was waiting for the craft to kind of turn a little bit so I could get more of a plan view look on it. And I was like, oh, there it is. And then the bottom had no blue and the top had blue. So if I could see blue and red, I was like, oh, okay, I'm seeing the top. And if it was just like a dark with a couple patterns, like, oh, okay, that must be the bottom. So that was majestic. Honestly, it was an incredible experience to see if the thing worked, build it, and it was super quick and easy to build, have it fly, and have it exhibit the flight tendencies that I was hoping it would, but had no idea. And I don't know that Red knew if it would. I think he had a good idea, like it'd probably work.
Yeah.
But it was really just exciting to kind of see that come from inspiration idea right before we talked to him to full success in a couple weeks.
Mm-hmm. And I mean, you've been kind of on and off working on that Prandtl design for, I mean, really before I was able to get into the hobby. So
yeah, about a couple years or a year, probably a couple years before you is when I started it. And I designed the one, and I had thrown it, and I knew it would fly, but when I put the motor on it, I just picked the wrong day, and was stubbornly perseverant, I guess, and I couldn't get out there and test if it worked, because that model might actually still work, and I plan on getting back to that eventually. But yeah, I've been working at this for a while. It's been something that captured my imagination and my mind's eye of like, I think I could do this cheaply and easily, that anybody could try this
Mm-hmm.
and not need a 3D printer or anything like that. And that's the other thing, is you can download and print a 3D printed version of it, which is awesome. Um, and you could build a balsa version, which is relatively simple and easy. The AMA website has all the information you need. But I was thinking, well, foam board is even quicker and easier if we can get this to work.
Right.
And I did, which is awesome. Makes me really happy. I was super ecstatic. I've got a couple videos. I guess we can link them in the description if you want to go check them out. I would love you to, because if you find the idea fascinating like I do, I think you might enjoy the videos. I flew the FT Duster a couple times and just had a good time cruising around the sky. Definitely did a little bit of that. And over the last week, there are two things that one of we've talked to him, Chris McCallum.
Mm-hmm.
He is the kind of guy who comes up with an idea and builds it that night and flies it the next day. Like, if I think I'm fast at building, Joe, or if you think I'm fast at building, like Chris has got me beat hands down. Anyway, he came up with a couple of ideas that he tested and looked really good. And I offered because they looked really fun. I had asked if he wanted help, like building plans, because I know he'll basically do it and just say, I don't have any plans.
Okay. Yeah,
Like,
I
no.
flew it. I built it. It's done.
Yeah, it's cool. We're good. And they were like, well, how'd you do that? And everybody's like, give me some plans. And I'm like, Chris, dude, you take pictures of this stuff as you go. Okay. As you cut them out, put a ruler next to it and just take pictures, send them to me, and I'll make you some plans. And then, so after I made the plans for him, it didn't take me long. It's kind of what I do. I used to draft before I became an engineer, and as an engineer, I draft often. So to me, it's easy and quick. So I took his plans, I beta built it to make sure that the build process went the way it's supposed to, and everything kind of fit properly. So we did that. And so he built a jet for 50 millimeter EDF. He called it Project X. He'll probably call it something different when it's all said and done.
Mm-hmm.
And so I built that because I had a 50 millimeter EDF just kind of sitting there waiting for a project. And then the Reptile Dragon. So the Reptile is a brand. Dragon is a kind of a FPV platform plane. It's like a twin tractor, high wing kind of plane. You put a camera on it and you fly it around for a while. They made a lot of revisions. So they made a second release. It has two types of tails, a T-tail and a V-tail. And so Chris looked at this thing and went, are you kidding me? Why would you pay that money when $5 gets you the model? Like, you can build one yourself. It's really easy.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been messing around with the KF, the Klein Fogelman type wings, which is literally like, you make your profile and cut that in half, and you put that on top.
Yeah.
And the front, and now you have your wing done. And he stiffened it up with some like carbon fiber arrow shaft or a big skewer or something like that. And he puts it on this like little pod with the T-tail in the back. It's really straightforward, very simple, very easy. He busted out those plans faster than I can say lickety split. I mean, he had it built and done. I'm like, dude, that looks really close, and it looks like it would fly very similarly. And of course, his videos showed that it flew well. I was like, all right, well, I helped him out with plans, so I built one. I've got it in the background here. Joe can see what I've done with it.
Yeah.
And over the last week, I've put it up in the air, and it was. I'm putting together the video now. It was incredibly touchy. All I can say is, it doesn't need much as far as throws, especially in the elevator. For controls, I'm sitting there. I'm like, at first I put the CG too far back, so it was really touchy to begin with. Like, it was the kind, like, you know how they say if your CG's too far back, you'll probably only fly it once.
Yeah.
And it's because basically every time you correct, it's going the opposite direction in a bad way, and then you correct to fix that, and now it's going the wrong way the other way. So I was basically doing it was a roller coaster ride the first attempt, for the
Mm-hmm.
first minute or so as I tried to bring it around the field. I did bring it home. I did fix the CG up a little bit further forward, and I was like, okay, I think this is it. I threw it, and it still had some of those tendencies, but it was a little bit better. I'm like, you know what? Let me bring it in one last time, and I pulled the battery even further forward. And then I don't know why, but I wasn't really paying too close attention to the CG. I was like, it's close. Um, Chris marked the points. He told me where it was, and I don't know. The first time, apparently, I just didn't even think about it. I was too excited because it was done. I wanted to see if it flew. My downfall, right? Then I flew it again, and it actually flew really well. Again, very touchy still, but at a constant throttle, you could just cruise around. And so cruise around I did. And I tried with the jet. The jet I also flew, and I couldn't get on the sticks fast enough, and it kind of rolled and turned to the left into the ground, and that was 2 seconds of flight. But the damage, it was a sturdy build, so I was able to glue it back together. Next day I flew it. It went pretty well. I was bringing it around for that first turn to bring it back towards me, like in over the wheat,
Right.
and I was just trying to see how far off the trim needed to be. And as I let go, it started to nose down. Apparently, I was way off trim. I needed more reflex than I thought I did to have it fly well. And I was like, oh shoot! And it went into the wheat, and the wheat saved most of it, but it had done enough damage where I had to bring it home and once again glue it back. But the third one, I did get up into the air. I double checked the CG. I actually put it a little bit further back, so we have a servo spot. And I found that the CG worked well for me about midway on the servos. We threw it in the air, and I was able to get a couple really good like circuits. Honestly, it was about a minute and a half, and which is about half as long of a flight as you're ever going to get on an EDF.
Mm-hmm.
And I had a tail surface kind of either give out or something, and it kind of twirled back into the ground, and it hit like dead nose first, and I was like, it's not gonna make it. Yeah, EDF came loose and like a bunch of other things. I was like, oh boy. But it flew. It was a lot of fun to fly. Like it making a ton of whooshing noises, and it was fast, and yet it was easy to control for the most part. And so I think the culprit on that build, I think I want to build it again. I'm going to use different control rods. I'm using like real thin. It's got more flex in it than I should have been okay with, I think.
Right.
And I think that was probably the culprit on this one. It needed sturdier control arms. So no big deal. But I built and flew those two. Oh, and then I went back to the Reptile Dragon 2, the foam board version. And because it flew generally pretty well at like 50% throttle, just kind of set it and forget it. I ordered this really big battery because I ended up ordering the real version, right? The foam board version. So I decided to do an endurance test because the whole point of these platforms of both the Banggood was had a big sale on it. So I ordered the official one. It was like $100 off. So
Okay.
Okay. Plus I wanted to see what the differences were. So I grabbed the two. I still haven't built the official one, but I ordered batteries to go with it. And we're talking like 5 milliamp batteries, which are really big, especially for effectively F-Pack style propulsion.
Okay.
So 2 quad motors, basically. So it was a 5 milliamp hour 3-cell battery. It's got a very wide, shallow fuse, so it just fit in there perfectly.
Hold on
So
now.
I set it up
5 milliamp or 500?
5 amp hour. So that's 5,000
Okay.
milliamp hour.
Wow. Okay. Whole
So
different ball game. Go ahead.
Yeah, whole different ballgame. I was sitting there like, this thing's kind of heavy, and when it weighs in, I think it's just over a kilogram. But the thrust is like 2 kilograms of thrust when you put it up to full,
Right.
right? On a 3-cell. I'm like, yeah, about that. I was like, wow. Technically, it should work, So I threw it, and sure enough, it flew no problem. I had that thing flying around the sky at 50% throttle, really not doing much, but kind of turning it a little bit here and there, and not doing anything crazy, just sort of puttering around the sky. It was a light breeze day. It lasted 40 minutes at least.
Goodness.
I don't know exactly because the battery went out on my phone. And I was and so the video goes up to 35 or 32 minutes. And I'm like, I remember when I had a guy visit the field and he's like, hey, you mind if I come out there and chat with you while you're doing that? I'm like, no, please. I'm going to be here a while, right? So I remember when he came out, it was about the midway. And in the video, he comes out at 20 minutes. He comes out
Okay.
and stands next to me at 20 minutes. So I'm thinking it was about a good 40 minutes, which means that setup is worthwhile to have FPV if you just want to tool around and just relax and have a good time. Get long range FPV, long range radio setup, and you can go just tool around and have a good, relaxing, ride in the sky, basically.
Mm-hmm.
And so that's the intent with this. And I want to compare the two between the official model, the official release, and then this foam board version. Foam board version, it's what, 2.5? No, it's 2 sheets and a carbon fiber air shaft. It's straightforward, very easy. I'm excited. I'm excited.
Good.
I'm glad that it worked out too. It took a little bit for me to get it to like fly comfortably on both
Right.
those with the jet and that, but the perseverance paid off because I really enjoyed the flights that I did get with it. That were just relaxing and fun. So if you get a chance, I know Chris will be putting those out somewhere. I think he'll either be putting them on his server and putting a link or something, but just be on the lookout for him. If you were interested in all the reviews that Ishin gave to everybody on the Reptile Dragon 2, you might be able to just build your own for a lot cheaper. So
Mm-hmm.
take a look out. And honestly, that's what's been keeping me busy for the last 2 weeks. Very busy, as I've made multiple trips to the field to kind of figure out how to get all of these craft out to fly. And it's
Okay.
been fun. So yeah, busy.
One thing that I was thinking about while you were talking about that during, I forget which plane it was, but you were talking about the trim and having to pull it back.
It's a jet.
It's been a while since this conversation occurred, but I was talking with Jesse about the different transmitters back when I was looking to buy one, and I ended up with the
Mhm.
Radio Master. And something because I know you run OpenTX on yours as well.
Yeah.
It may be worth getting. He had mentioned he's got a switch that he can like it's a momentary switch, so he can pull it and hold it. But it's programmed that when he holds it long enough that it sets his trim settings to what the stick inputs currently are.
Mm. I'll have to ask him about that because that would be very helpful on maidens. Because where
Mhm.
you get it up in the air and it's flying around, but you're holding sticks in a weird position.
Yeah, and he can
It would,
just flip a
yeah,
switch and hold it and let it go, and it'll
it'll set it.
set the trims to where your sticks are. Yeah,
Nice. And then all you got to do is remember to fix the trims when you bring it down.
right.
Well, like I said, that's awesome. I'm gonna look into that. Um, did we get any feedback in the last couple weeks? Do you know, Joe?
Um, I think just the one comment that was in the Discord server. I'll let you since you actually replied to it.
So our comment was from Neil. If I recall right, he's over across the pond.
Mm-hmm.
And he said that his comment was the special guest shows were superb. I would have listened to another 2 episodes. Fascinating stuff. Red was an amazing guest. And I replied that I agreed, and I thanked him so much for the feedback. We really appreciate when you guys, when the listeners, everybody reaches out and lets us know how we're doing. Even if it's something you'd rather see more of or less of, let us know.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah,
And that was a very long conversation with Red, and it, he was very polite and like very engaged throughout the whole thing. So it was nice. Like his time was really appreciated.
Yeah, very much. I'm seriously, I could talk to him for days probably, but I'm glad that we didn't for everybody else's sake. I guess we have a reminder about our when this releases. We'll have missed the nearest build night, but there'll be a build night the following Saturday, June 26th, between 11 to 2, and that's
Eastern Standard Time
Eastern Standard. Yeah,
or
Eastern
day,
Standard Time.
whatever it currently is, but Eastern Time.
Daylight?
Yeah.
Yeah, I don't know. It's weird daylight stuff. Yeah, 11 to 2 Eastern Time here in the States. So if you can bring your computer over to your build table, build with us for a little while. I have no idea what I'll be building by that point. It really could be anything.
Mm-hmm.
As I tend to jump from thing to thing, and I've already got a couple things that inspired me. I know Flight Fest is coming up real soon, in about a month almost exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so I know I'm going to be looking forward to, okay, what do I need to finish up if I want to bring it to Flight Fest? Let me make sure that it's ready.
Right.
So I'll be looking through my fleet of things that I may want to bring and make sure if there are certain things that I have them ready. And yeah. So let us say, if you want, reach out to us. Let us know if you're going to Flight Fest. I know I'm definitely going to be there. I think Joe's trying to figure out if he can make it or not still. So we're going to do that, but we'll talk about it. I love it if you come up, if you see us out there, see me out there, just say hello, let us know what's going on. Hopefully I'll catch some interesting stuff while I'm there. And I would love if we can do that together. But I know that, life is quirky and weird, and sometimes it just doesn't always work out the way you want. But I'm hoping, just reach out, let us know that if you're going to be there, and I'll be on the lookout. Oh, one last thing that I guess I'm doing in the hobby is I'm cleaning out my hobby room.
Okay.
It's been a hot mess for a long time. So I've just I finished setting up my build table the way I want, and I've pulled everything out. So until I figured out how I want it placed, then I'll bring it back in.
Well, good.
So I'm eager to get that taken care of before the kids come back, so that I have a spot that I can just keep all the planes, and I can stop polluting the house, as some people might call it, with all the builds that I put together.
All right. So, getting back into it.
So main topic, yeah.
Yep. Modern day trainers.
Nice. All right. Oh, and excluding helis, we're going to leave that for a different day. Because technically you can have trainer helis for sure. Because you got to learn how to do that some way, right?
I guess that's true. I don't know why the first thing that popped into my mind for a trainer heli was a Chinook. And I'm sure those are not those are not a trainer heli.
So, okay, this will betray my age. But imagine Tom Selleck's buddy in Magnum PI who flew that little helicopter, the little Huey. Probably one of those. No? Oh, man,
never watched it.
Oh my God. Okay. It's amazing. Anyway, so he lived in Hawaii, so there's a lot of island hopping. There's a helicopter in there. It's basically just that little MASH helicopter. That's also betraying my age. All right, I'll stop.
And now watch MASH.
Okay, so the little all windshield helicopter that's nothing but frame. It's essentially what it is, except there's actually like a little bit of metal, body to it, but not much. It's that kind of style. Those are good, as I understand it. Those are pretty much trainer helis. Anyway, so I guess the big question is we already talked about we're going to start talking about when we talk about these modern day trainers, we're going across the whole board. So it's going to be civilian and military. So when we kind of talk about the plane, what we found is that a lot of these some of these, I should say, have started as civilian aircraft and were repurposed for military purposes in some cases. And when you get into the jet age, there is almost no civilian purpose for a jet fighter craft, just
Right.
period. But you do need trainer aircraft that allow you to start learning, right? So um, I guess I wanted to talk about what happened after World War II, right? Um, Basically, how do you protect against aircraft at that point? Well, it's anti-aircraft guns, right? And of course, the Navy, Army, and the Air Force um, are your defense against. Every country has a branch of these um,
Right.
in some fashion or another, and that's basically how you protect a country from an invading, air threat, right? And really, so you're going to have anti-aircraft guns in some fashion or another. And then from that, you're going to use, radar and guided missiles when you're kind of really far out. And you're going to have any of the aircraft um, from the carriers. So the carriers are going to have groups of aircraft that basically patrol. So you have the air patrol groups that are way out in the ocean that are kind of patrolling. That's your outside perimeter, and they're going to be relying on radar and long range guided missiles and things like that to basically address threats as they come up, right?
Mm-hmm.
And that'll be and these are with these sorties, these groups that go out to patrol, they'll have basically AWACS, airborne early warning and control. They're that weird little UFO dish that sits on top of the aircraft.
Mm-hmm.
And that's basically like a portable radar. So it can extend the range of your radar.
I'm trying to remember what the name of that plane was, and I used to know it because was it just the AWAC was what that plane was called?
I mean, I think it's what everybody called it, but it was the AWAC was the thing on top of the actual plane, and the
Oh, wow.
plane was I'm trying to I know exactly what you're talking about, and I can't remember exactly which plane that was. Maybe as we go through some of the list.
It was I understood him as AWACS, which is a different abbreviation for what you got, but it was mounted on top of a modified Boeing 707.
Oh yeah, yep, that was one, right? Because I mean, think about it, they're very fuel efficient and they can fly long range, right?
Mm-hmm.
So after you have those groups, then you have which includes the combat air patrol. Then you have your surface to air missiles, which those are hard mounted, and oftentimes they'll be included in naval groups. So they'll be mounted on aircraft carriers and things like that. And for the most part, they're somewhat autonomous. But you'll also have those stationed at strategic spots around your country to protect them from invading air. So basically, what they do is they detect a threat and they send out a series of missiles that are guided or heat-seeking, and they basically then try to destroy the craft that's coming in, the threat.
Right.
And then, so your backup to that is then your man-portable air defense system, which is basically your shoulder shoot 'em and forget 'em, or your guided shoulder-mounted fired things. So or something very similar, which would be these SAMs and missile launchers and things of those natures that might even fire high altitude, long range missiles. And for my age people, which is 45 or so, think of Spies Like Us.
I saw it.
So you know what I'm talking about. So those
excellent comedy. Yep.
Yeah, it's fantastic. But it's basically those kind of missile. Doctor.
Sorry, go ahead.
No, perfect. Anyway, so but these so these are your portable air defense systems that they're you can move them around your country and put them in places as they need. And so those are as you're coming in further and further from the perimeter of where you're trying to defend, right? So this is what these are the systems that aircraft nowadays have to contend with. And of course, back from World War II, it pretty much started with just anti-aircraft guns and the various versions of it. And as they got better and bigger, and then of course she started getting radar, which could actually detect aircraft before they come, which I think was already in place. Then they started learning how to build guided missiles, and then with that comes all these other things, right? Um, and now you're protecting against flight envelopes. It used to be, 200 knots, I think, or 300 knots was about the speed. Now you're
Hmm.
looking at jet aircraft that are now going almost twice that, right? At the end of World War II, it just started to happen. And but as you get closer and closer, now you have planes that can go past the speed of sound.
Yeah.
You're going Mach 1, Mach 2, Mach 3. We were talking to Red. He's talking about aircraft that go Mach 7 or Mach 9 or some nonsense. Like, what the heck?
Yeah. I
And
mean, for
somehow
very short durations, but
it doesn't matter. In that short duration, you're covering an entire continent almost.
yeah.
It's crazy. Anyway, so the idea is these air defense systems have to protect against things that could potentially go that fast. So these are the things that modern trainers are trying to train new pilots for, is to get a pilot who's a guy who says, I like to fly, up to speed to actually be able to maneuver an aircraft that has to beat any one of these or all of these protection systems,
Well,
right?
specifically, military trainers and such. Because
Military, yeah, good
now,
point.
now, now I feel bad because you've gone into the military side of this, and I picked
I
a
did.
civilian trainer.
No, that's okay. But I mean, but then you have a civilian trainer. We're like, well, how do you know if you even want to be a pilot in the military? Well, you got to learn how to fly.
Hmm.
And if you don't know anything, which is how most people start flying, then you've got to have a plane that's forgiving. And we've talked about some of this before. Um, but they're really important. They're
Hmm.
important in helping people understand if this is something that's exciting, something that they want to do. And most
Right.
people know they either want to do it or, it's not a big deal. But either way, both systems, um, both military and civilian systems, each of these trainers, part of the point of the trainers is to train pilots on the newest, latest, greatest electronic system. And they are ever changing for the same reasons we just talked about. All of these technologies are evolving and improving. And even our airspace, right? Our airspace used to be you call up the tower and say, hey, I'm coming in, kind of deal, right? With your radio or whatever. But nowadays, like the bigger airports have semi automated systems. They have HUD displays that show the corridor you're supposed to fly in to approach the
Really?
airports. Yes, they can. I don't know if many of them do, but this is how they're trying to basically streamline getting more planes down and up so that the throughput in any given high capacity airport increases. Because what you're
Hmm.
doing is you're starting to clog the skies. You can't land enough planes at any given airport to be able to move the people that need to get moved. Now, this is before COVID, and hopefully it'll be soon. Things will kind of restore, but that's what a lot of the air systems nowadays have been working towards, is to be able to streamline the process of air traffic so that way there are less variables and people can land and take off quicker. And so with that, you need the appropriate electronics. And as a pilot, you need to understand how they work and practice with them. And the best way to do that is with these trainers, right? Um, and I continue on with all the different, military things. You got the anti-radiation missiles, which is basically a jamming system. Then you have electronic countermeasures and electronic countermeasures, which is, the um I'm trying to think of like a Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck with a duck season, rabbit season, duck season, back and forth and back and forth and back. And that's
Hmm.
essentially what countermeasures and countermeasures and keep going. I mean, all the way to the point where you're getting like stealth paint, which is literally a paint that absorbs every wavelength thrown at it,
Yeah.
which is crazy. And that's a way to jam countermeasures, right? And of course, who knows where it'll all go. With any luck, we'll all decide we're all one planet and stop worrying about internal battles and maybe focus outward. I don't know what.
You know, years ago, and yeah, I'm getting old enough I can say that now. I had it was way back in high school. I actually had an opportunity to go to Lockheed.
Oh, nice.
Yeah, and I don't know if I ever mentioned that before, at least on air. And we got to walk through Lockheed, their production line, and see. It was one of the cargo variants that were in production at the time, the C1 something, C180s or something. But I also got
something.
but also got to see the F-22s going out in line, and as part of that, you talk about the radar absorbing paint.
Yeah.
They would, so this is early in the 22s. They would hang the 22s from a dangle wire, basically, and put them in this big room and bombard it with radar. After
just
it was
to test
painted,
it.
and slowly rotate it just to see how much they were getting off of it. Since you were talking
Nice.
about, the radar absorbing paint.
Yeah. Yeah, it's awesome. I mean, again, and at some point, I think maybe we will go down some of those paths to explore these in more detail. I mean, it'll probably be a while, but this kind of stuff is what shapes why planes are the way they are, right?
Mm-hmm.
Why is an F-22 basically like a sliver of metal?
Yeah,
and they're working
profile.
right, low profile, and they're working it as hard as they can, designers are, to eliminate doing what the Prandtl wing does, which is eliminating the vertical surfaces, because that's what's reflecting your radar signal. So if you can make a plane that has almost no heat signature and looks like a sliver of nothing, could be a bird, now you're completely invisible, and you can, other than visual sight, you're pretty much autonomous.
Mm-hmm.
And not autonomous. Yeah, I think that's right.
No, autonomous is unmanned
No,
almost.
well, you know what I mean.
Anonymous maybe was what you were going for, but that's not quite right.
No, and if hopefully if you're listening, you understand where I'm getting at. Anyway, so all of these lead to like the different kinds of trainers, right? And we're going to go through a list here, and this is just a little bit of a list. We'll have a link to a bigger list that I found. I thought it was pretty good as a comprehensive list from like 1950 basically on. And I'll have some dates to kind of give, because some of these, it kind of jumps around time wise, but it'll be interesting because you can see like there are clear reasons why certain fighters, or certain planes were developed. You know what I mean? And why they're trainers. Like, this is trainer just because, you need to know how to fly and fight, right? Okay. So you need a plane that can do that. Or just like you need to know a bunch of, you have to have a plane that's versatile, like the Air Tractor AT-802, which is the crop duster. Multi-role aircraft. You can pretty much do anything you want with it. It flies low, slow. You can do acrobatics. It can go fast, as clearly Dusty Crop Hopper told us about. If you watch the Planes movies. No, but essentially it's a very high visibility, durable aircraft that can do a ton of different things. It's a multi-role aircraft. It's a great way to train because it's very forgiving, and it allows for different tendencies and you to try a bunch of different things with the same airframe, right? Look at the Aero L-39 Albatross. That's a jet aircraft. Sukhoi Su-27 is another one of those in that same kind of era where, you need to train on jets. Jets behave differently. Your cockpit requirements and what you're going to be focused on is going to be different than if you're flying a Spitfire or something of a more older vintage. I'm going to skip this one here. We're going to talk about that at the end because I think this is where modern aviation is heading towards. But like the Antonov AN-2, it's a biplane. It's great for training people on utility or agriculture purposes. It's a Russian-built craft. Antonovs are they build a lot of the really giant bomber craft and things like that. And we talked about how biplanes were very popular in teaching pilots how to fly and how to do maneuvers and things like that. And if you're going to be like an agricultural spray craft or something like that, much like the tractor, the air tractor, um, you need to fly low. You need to know how to deal with a lot of different situations and you need to be able to fly over field and cover the whole thing, right? With whatever you're dusting. So, so the biplane isn't entirely gone from the world of aviation. Another example is and I picked this one partly because I've actually designed and built a model, and I have it's one of those ones that's about 95% all but the landing gear. Is the Avion IAR 99 SOIM or SOIM. It's a Romanian, specifically a Romanian jet from 1985. It's a traditional jet. It's got good jet lines. It's there to train the Romanian Air Force on dogfighting and protecting their borders and things like that.
Right.
And it's a pretty cool looking craft. BAE Hawk. It's an advanced trainer light strike aircraft. It's another, very versatile, very iconic fighter trainer. That was in 1976. We talked about the Texan, the T6 Texan from Beechcraft.
Right.
Same, and honestly, much along the same lines, but more in a civilian 2-engine capacity, is the Beechcraft Bonanza. It's got some interesting lines on it. You got the Skyhawk and the Skylane, which are classics. Classic trainers from Cessna 172 and 182, which Joe will get into in a little bit. We have, if you wanted to learn how to do twin engine light utility aircraft, the Diamond DA-42 Twin Star in 2014. That's a far more advanced version of a lot of the planes we've kind of talked about. But, and they go kind of across the world in the sense, like, these aren't just American aircraft. You know what I mean? We may be sitting in America now, but a lot of these, the Romania, Russia, the Twin Star. I'm trying. The next one is Chinese. It's Hongdu JL-10 or the L-15 Falcon. It's an advanced jet fighter and light attack aircraft in 2010, so it's only like 10 years old. It's designed to teach pilots what they're going to get into when they do supersonic flight, because it's a different animal.
I can't imagine that, like, if there's I don't know if there's a sensation difference when you actually pass threshold. I don't know if there is, but just the knowledge, like, that feeling of supersonic. Like, what that must be like to be in that cockpit.
I know, right? I don't know. I don't know. I guess we can watch a bunch of videos and hope that helps.
Yeah, I think I saw one time where it was like there's really no difference, but just the knowledge. Anyway,
no,
just
I'm
knowing that you're there. Sorry, go ahead.
I know, right? Like, what? I'm going faster than the speed of sound, except I can't hear myself because it's behind me.
That's not how that works.
I know it's not how that works. I also put on the Navmark Tiger Shark. It's basically a surveillance recon aircraft, but it's a UAV, so an unmanned aerial vehicle. And there's a whole set of those, and of course that list is growing. If you're going to remotely pilot, you need to train on something. Let's see. You have the I'm going to pronounce this wrong. I want to say it's Pilates, but it's not. It's Pilatus, PC-21 and
nice.
the PC-24. They're Swiss aircraft. So two-seater intermediate flight trainer aircraft in 2008, and then a light passenger jet aircraft. I mean, you need to learn how to fly jet aircraft. They behave very differently. They, as I was told by a friend who flies commercially, you're flying a bus, so it's going to steer like a bus. It doesn't. It's not super sensitive and super responsive. It's going to fly kind of sluggish. So you need to learn how to fly that. It's different. The Gripen or the Griffin by Saab JAS. That is a Swedish 4th gen fighter. And I'm hoping that when we get to the fighter stuff, which should be very soon, that we start covering what are these generations, you know. But basically, as we get more advanced in, I guess, how much the pilot has to actively fly the craft as opposed to just guiding it.
Right.
I think that's where we start getting from like 3rd gen to 4th gen to 5th gen. But I think the F-22 has such a guidance system where really the pilot isn't worried about flying the craft. He's worried about making sure it goes where it's supposed to. And the computer systems in it are doing a lot of the minutia of the flying to get it to do what he wants it to do, right? He just points and tells the computer where he wants the plane to go, and it does. I think, let's see, we talked about the Sukhoi S-27, the moniker is a flanker. And that is in 1985. It's a Soviet super flanker. This is a craft that even to this day, you know, people talk about. I was watching something, some YouTube video about, I guess, engagements by fightercraft training, you know, trainer exercises, and how they grabbed a couple of these Sukhoi, and I don't think it was Su-27, but it was the aircraft that the Russians put together had so much, some of them had so much power in them that like they didn't have a limit, you know, whereas like, you know, some of the American aircraft would hit like, okay, that's about as fast as we go, you know, as far as acceleration. Like these things would just kept going faster and faster and faster. It's like, what in the world? So when you're, you know, you got to be, you can't just hop into one of those and go, it should be fine. It's like my Cessna back home, you know? And then I think the other one I wanted to add, and it's very much like the T6 Texan, is the Yakolov, the Yak 52. Yakolov was manufactured in a lot of the Russian planes that became very prominent and very popular. Again, it's kind of like we talked about the T6 Texan last time a bit, and I mean, if you look at them, they look very similar. And it may be one was actually, in fact, copied from the other. And I'm pretty sure the Russian might have copied the T6 Texan design. It's maybe a cultural bias. I don't know. But, you know, those kinds of planes are still used today to train pilots on maneuvers and different kinds of flying styles. Okay. And I think for me, when I looked at this list, you know, when we looked at the World War II list, it was clear it was the people involved in the war, the World War II, which, I mean, was World War, so it's like everybody. But obviously there were major powers, and they dominated the list, right? Here, the list is all over the place. I mean, straight out all over the place. India, China, a little bit of Australia, Thailand, Korea, obviously America, Russia, a lot of European countries. I mean, it's really all over the place. Basically, every country has an air force, and they need to train their people. And so each force has a way to defend it that's unique. And so they need craft that match that.
And not even just from a military standpoint, even civilian. Like this is a short list of trainers that are out there, because there's just tons of them, military and civilians. And then once you get into the civilian field, like all the different variants, like different things can classify as a trainer just based on its design and how easy it is to fly. So
hmm
there's a lot more out there. We're just the short list.
Yeah, that's a short list. Joe, you picked a plane that I think is, if you don't know this plane, I think you live under a rock and you don't care about planes.
So harsh.
I know,
Um,
I know. Well,
so
prove me wrong then.
yeah, so yeah, I didn't. Now I feel terrible for picking this one because your intro to this
No.
whole topic, but um, yeah, I'll talk about the Cessna 172, the Skyhawk.
How
Well,
could
and
we, hold on, how could we finish up trainers and not talk about the Skyhawk? I mean,
yeah,
straight out, like that would be a sin to not.
I know. I
I
just
think you picked good.
yeah. So I picked that one because that was one that in simulator I learned to fly. Like
hmm
the design of it, the concept of it, the 172 is iconic of civilian aircraft to me.
hmm
Um, when I think of a civilian plane, prop driven trainer, the 172 comes to mind.
Yeah.
And for good reason. As I started doing research into it, like there's a good reason they're widely known. They're uh, the most produced plane in the world based on what I'm seeing. So, yeah, the Cessna 172 was first flown in 1955. I think first sold in 1956, and there have been more of them built than any other aircraft. And as of 2015, there was more than 44,000 built. Now, 2015 was the most recent number I could find, but more
Whoa.
than, yeah, and that's still counting because they're still in production, uh, to my knowledge. Uh,
Wow.
yeah, 44,000 of them is, when I'm thinking, I'm like, man, why do I see them everywhere? 44,000 doesn't sound like that much. And then I, went and looked up how many F-16s were produced. I was like, oh, that's a big
Yeah.
difference in, in number.
Yeah, right.
Um, so the 172, it originated as a variant of the 170, the Cessna
Okay.
170. It was a tail drag. The 170 was a tail dragger. But what became the 172 was a 170C variant
Okay.
that they put on what is called tricycle landing gear. So instead of the
hmm
tail dragger, you got the nose gear. That was the 170C when they were developing it, and then they later it actually initially got its approval as a certified airplane, whatever the certification process they
Yeah.
have to go through to produce and manufacture. It was originally done under the 170 C, and then was later retyped as the 172 as its own model.
hmm
Um, and over the years, there have been many, many, many different variants of this plane, and I've made a short list going through a few of the variants, and I'll be skipping model numbers or designations. Just I kind of picked and pulled the ones that look like there were major changes made,
Okay.
major in features and such. So through all the different variants, there were maybe motor tweaks or small changes, but these were sort of the bigger models that appeared to have made most changes. So the 172 was the base design. It originally had a uh, square fin design for the tail fin and the rudder.
Okay.
So it was almost square. It more stood straight up than had that swept back look. The 172A, which came out in 1960, introduced the more iconic swept back tail fin and rudder that we're accustomed to seeing when we think of the 172. And the 172A introduced float fittings,
Okay.
so that the Cessna could land on water. As far as I can tell, the float fittings, I don't know if all of them or just the pictures I was seeing, the float fittings still had wheels on them, so they could be the plane could still land on a runway. So
Okay.
instead of a tricycle design at that point, each pontoon of the float fittings would have a front and back wheel. So I think the front wheels were probably swivel based so that it could still, taxi and turn on land.
Mm-hmm.
The 172C in 1962, I pulled this one because it was interesting. Introduced an optional autopilot.
Ooh.
I don't know a whole lot about that one.
Is it like let go of the sticks and walk on the back and make a sandwich?
I think
I'm just
it was.
kidding.
Yeah, I think the autopilot was either it might have been roll control to keep it on a heading. It was probably a one-axis autopilot. I don't know.
Okay.
I do want to look a little more into that.
That's pretty likely. That way you're not actually having to actively push the plane around. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
Because that gets tiring.
It does, and I mean, there's trim that can be put into a plane too, but trim doesn't account for if a side gust hits you or something.
Right. Oh, little side note. I just looked up how many 737s, like Boeing 737, which is like the backbone of many airlines, right? 15. There's under 15,000 units produced.
Really?
Yeah, and most of the other variants, like the 767, 797, and that kind of stuff, they're looking at like 1,000, maybe 4,000 in each one of those. Like adding them all up, you're still probably well under half of however many 172s that are produced.
Yeah.
Isn't that crazy?
It's well known and iconic for a reason, and it was just well received. Like, and I've been in one. They're nice. Yeah, they're just, yeah. And I guess I should have said on the front end. I meant to. They do have dihedral in their wings, so that's another aspect of them. And I should say, they're a high mount wing. So they've got that aspect of the trainer to them. They're just all around an easy to fly, easy to handle, gentle plane.
Yeah. Which makes it easy to learn.
Yep. So going back to the 172C, which had the optional autopilot. Again, I do kind of want to look into what all that was about. But in that model, they also introduced a key starter instead of the pull starter. So I guess the earlier versions, I don't know if they had it inside the cockpit or if they had to open up the engine cowl to grab a pull start. But the original motors were pull started.
Huh.
Or they were, get out and pull the prop. And also, in that C variant, a child seat option was available for the baggage area. You get a child seat, and I guess they had the mounting points to put a kid seat in the baggage area, which sat behind the back seat. So the 172 had the two front seats, pilot, co-pilot, and then a bench seat in the back for two passengers, and then there was a baggage luggage space behind that. Yeah.
Cool.
The 172D in 1963 introduced the what they're calling the lower rear fuselage, which I think is just where the tail section of fuselage swept down lower, which opened viewport range, if you will, to be able to put in a rear window. So that's when you first got the rear window in the 172s. Also, I found interesting, with the 172D was introduced the 172D Powermatic. But the Powermatic was supposedly actually a 175 Skylark. But it was rebranded as the 172 Powermatic because they were trying to overcome a bad reputation of poor engine reliability in the Skylarks.
Okay.
So they were trying to rebrand so they could make that, but the rebranding failed, and neither the Skylark or the Powermatic variant of 172 were produced after that year. Those were both dropped. 1965 saw the 172F. It introduced electrically operated flaps. instead of the older lever operated. So
Okay.
you're able to get the electronics in there. 1969 brought the K variant, which offered optional 52-gallon wing fuel tanks.
Okay. So increased fuel capacity and range.
Right, and with it saying that they were optional, I guess there's a internal fuel tank in the main fuselage, and then you could get the extra tanks out in the wings.
Mm-hmm.
And I remember doing a pre-flight years ago when I went in that Cessna, and we walked around the plane, and I remember the pilot reaching up and checking fuel lines for water, and they ran in the wings, so he probably had that optional kit on there. So in my list from 1969, we're going to jump a number of years to the 172N.
You mean it wasn't a perfect aircraft then?
Oh no, they kept going. The 172N in 1977 introduced a rudder trim option. So I guess prior to that, they didn't have a trim option for a rudder and pre-selectable flaps. So with the electronic driven flaps, you now have preset positions for, I guess, the 10 degree, 20, 30 degree on the flaps.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, the one I did the test ride,
I
can't remember what that's called. I know that's not what it's called, but anyway, forgive me for the ride along, I guess. That model, it was a 172, and if I recall right, it did have the pre-selectable flap options. Obviously, you could choose, but there were definitely places you could just put it right there. 10, 20. Yeah.
And then the last variant on my list that I've got noted. Again, we were in 1977 with the N. We're jumping in 1996.
Almost 20 years later, huh?
Yep, almost with a 172R. It was the first model with factory-fitted fuel-injected engine. So factory-fitted fuel injection.
Okay.
And there was a list of other great upgrades on them, but it looks like the 172R was the first model to include as a standard kit the 4-point intercom system.
Oh, nice. So you could have a conversation with your passengers while you're on a trip.
Right. And I guess that was a add-on feature that they could get in previous models, but that was the first model to have it, from the factory like that.
Okay.
And then there's a lot of other models in there. One model that's not in that list was the O variant. There was no O variant because they did not want to have the 172O be confused as a 172.0. So they skipped the O variant in their designations.
It's a pretty good reason.
So some other models that they did test, they researched, tested, designed electric and diesel designs. So it was electric version and then a diesel that would have burned Jet A fuel, but basically a diesel engine. But those never really left R&D. While they did do test flights and stuff with them, they never hit production status.
Right. Just in case. Look, I mean, the price of gas, and this is auto fuel, right? Has gone in the last 20 years from $1.50 to like $3 or even almost $4 and back again.
Yeah.
I mean, that dramatically changes the viability of some of the other engines possibilities, right? So yeah, you definitely want to have those in your back pocket just in case you need it.
Well,
as a manufacturer, you know what I mean?
Yeah, and there was a time diesel was real cheap because it's more of a byproduct of the main gas production, but now diesel's your most expensive.
Yeah.
Yeah. No, I remember diesel being 20 cents cheaper than the cheap gas, and now it's most expensive thing on the menu.
The golden days.
So the 172 has been continues to be used in military service. It does serve as a trainer craft. In the Air Force and the Army. I think the Army might still use them. I know there's still several in use with the Air Force, and I think they've got a couple out at the Air Force Academy out in Colorado Springs. But the military does have its variant of the 172. It's the T-41. I'm gonna butcher this. Mescalero.
Yeah, it looks like
Um,
that sounds about right.
yeah. Um, so it's still used as a trainer craft for getting guys introduced to flight. But
Yeah.
there's also a small fleet of the T-41s or the 172s that are being used for patrolling the U.S.-Mexico border.
Okay.
In that area.
Yeah, that's a lot of barren territory over there.
Hmm. And the 172s are ideal for it.
Yeah.
Oh, and
Good visibility.
one thing I forgot to put in my list, because I was talking to you about it, I didn't come back and put it in my notes.
Okay.
There's a record for longest flight time, continuous, and then I think for like refueled and recrewed. But the 172, I'm trying to find it here. It was back in 1958 to 1959. Two gentlemen, Robert Tim and John Cook, set the world record for flight endurance, refueled flight endurance using the Cessna 172. So these guys took off and flew the Cessna nonstop. They refueled in flight, which how they modify their plane to do that, I don't know. Just one thing in a list of modifications these guys had to make, because being able to refuel as part of this flight endurance, they kept that plane up in the air for 64 days, 22 hours, 19 minutes, and 5 seconds.
Oh my god!
Almost 65 days straight.
Holy crap! Can you imagine being in a Cessna for 2 months?
That's over 2 months.
I mean, right.
Yeah, and
I can't imagine it for 2 months, let alone over 2 months.
Mm-hmm. and beforehand, before we got going, like you and I were discussing some of the modifications you'd have to make to a plane to be able to do that. But yeah. Anyway, so
yeah, you ponder that if you would.
Yeah.
You know, think about all the things you like, the different. I mean, think of it. It's like a extended Baja race, but in the sky. You can't land. You can't stop. You just got to keep going. You know, like somebody pull up beside you and kind of throw things through your window. I mean, maybe.
Yeah, but I mean, these things are cruising fast enough. I mean, their cruising speed is that it's not. I don't think they could. I don't know how they did it. How they were getting supplies back and forth, unless they just loaded up with all those supplies beforehand, which is a lot of water.
Now, I'm wondering if they basically brought somebody up over top of them they dropped a line, and then once they caught the line in their plane, they would ferry things down, and then they would clip whatever waste out. And there's got to be something like that going on. That's worth looking into, because that's crazy.
Yeah,
that's crazy.
So I was putting these notes together tonight, so there's going to be a couple things I'm going to want to go back and have a look at, like how in the world. But
I know, right?
Yeah, that's the 172, the plane that I came to love,
Nice.
and still do. When I see them, that's what I think of as a civilian plane.
Yeah. Well, I picked a Cessna plane as well, and that was purely by accident. I know. Well, I picked a military variant, and partly because we'd already talked about it before. I built a small one of these, tried to get it, actually did get it to fly, but not very well. I've been in the process of actually designing a bigger version of the Cessna T-37 Tweet, or Super Tweet, as it ended up becoming known, or the A-37 Dragonfly. There were 618, because we were talking about numbers. There was only 618 of these made, but they've definitely made their presence known from the Vietnam War era on.
Okay.
It is an American light attack aircraft that was developed from the A-37 Dragonfly. It's the attack aircraft developed from the T-37 Tweet, which is basically a basic jet trainer that Cessna made in the 1960s to 1970s. Now, the Vietnam War was 1964, and I've got a window to 19. At least it was used in Vietnam War era tasks through 1975, and it basically provided a lot of low, slow air support. So while the jets might come in and scream across the sky, these would come in kind of underneath it and behind them, and do a lot of low bombing support runs. From 1972, I think that's actually supposed to be 1970. 1964 to 1970 is the Vietnam War period, I believe. I might have mistyped that, so sorry.
Yeah,
Maybe we can get
I'm
a listener to
terrible with
correct.
with
I
those
know.
eras.
Yeah, I mean, I didn't live through it, so it's not. Even if I did, I couldn't even tell you when Desert Storm and Desert Shield were exactly. Um, anyway,
Early 90s.
19. That's the best I could tell you better, but ultimately they're not set in stone in my mind either. Okay, so from after the Vietnam War era, the plane was basically distributed around the globe and purchased from different militaries around the globe as a great jet trainer. The This plane has side by side seating, so it's a kind of wide, kind of squat jet plane. It has two J69 turbine engines that produced 2,400 pounds of force each in the A37 model. And that was the basically the early version. And after a little while, the military said, we want to start putting hard points on this thing and being able to increase capacity of what it can carry, especially in the Vietnam area. Um,
Mhm.
and so they ended up taking this really quality, I guess. Well, that's subjective, but the basic jet trainer, and making it more capable in the war arena. Um, so they would basically, to make the A37B model, they increased the strength of the wing, so it could turn higher Gs. It went from a 5G capacity to a 6G capacity. It added 3 hard points per wing and 500-pound or 1,500-pound capacity, as well as they changed the jet engines out for one that produced 15% more thrust. The J85s is the model, and it produced an additional 450 pounds of force of thrust. So while it was still slower than most aircraft of the time, its size made it really hard to hit, and it was much slower. So you would, if you were fighting defense against the Air Force, they'd basically be coming in with the jets. The jets would trigger all the anti-aircraft, and I guess the Viet Cong were looking at, they're used to leading for jets. So as the tweets would come in, they would see all of the tracer fire way ahead of them because that's where they were leading. They're
Mhm.
leading the planes to. So they would rarely, um, they would see basically the fire before it got to them. You know what I mean? So they were able to get out of the way. Um,
Well, and
and
what you're kind of saying is that the ground units that were firing up at them were accustomed to faster aircraft. This one was flying slow, so they were shooting way ahead of it.
yeah,
Because they were expecting it to be a lot faster.
yeah. Thank you for clarifying. Yeah, exactly. That's it. And thank you
I
for
got
making
you.
that clear. Yeah, I appreciate it. And when we're talking about small, I don't know how big most jets are. I thought they were. I always think they're bigger, but depending on the jet, they can get pretty small. These planes are 28 feet long, and 36 feet in wingspan. So they're and the wing surface area. I mean, they're not super wide wings. They're not like a big panel. They're pretty short.
Right.
So they don't present a lot of surface area to aim for, no matter which way you're looking at this plane. It flies up to 440 knots, which is 500 miles an hour, and it has a 41 41,000 foot ceiling, and at about what I guess 12,000, they start needing air. So it's an unpressurized cabin. So they actually have oxygen in the craft separately. So they once they get past 12,000 feet, they put on a mask to be able to breathe.
Okay.
The plane has 930 miles range. Part of why they strengthened the wing when they made the B model is so they could add additional fuel capacity. In some of the sorties, instead of adding missile hard points, they would put fuel, two extra fuel capacities to extend the range to match with what they were accompanying.
I wonder if they would drop those excess tanks later in flight. Like, I think the F-16s can do that.
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know if they would. That makes sense that they might. Heck, they dropped everything else. Uh, I mean, if you look at these things, they're like fully outfitted. They're like bristling with missiles. Either they had air-to-air missiles for defense, as well as again, each hard point had 3 locations for bomb drops. So you're looking at with 3 of those, 6. So times 3. Let me do math out loud. So like 18 spots to drop, and then some of that. So basically, it would go, and as they'd be flying so low that as they were focused on making sure that they would drop their bombs on the right spot on the ground, they would not realize how close they were to the ground. And a lot of maintenance crews would find that the bottoms of the aircraft would have like grass and tree leaves and stuff stuck on the bottom of the planes. So and that's what they do. They basically go, I guess, parallel with the line, and they would drop their bombs. They come around, and then they would follow it up with napalm. I think that was the tactic. So as they were doing this kind of double strafe run, they would be focused on their target, and because they're already low, they're not like a higher altitude fighter. They would very much be at risk of getting right down to the ground. So I thought it was pretty interesting. The last thing that they have, that was something that they have. That this I was surprised to see. These are kind of set up like a Volkswagen, where the cargo space is in the front, and the cargo space is not very big, but it's big enough, and it's basically next to the Gatling gun that they have. This has a 3,000 round per minute Gatling gun that shoots out the left side, I think.
Goodness.
I know, right? And it carries 1,500 rounds, so you got 30 seconds of firing. But what a lot of the pilots who operated this during the war, they found that the Gatling really wasn't terribly effective against ground targets. So they said it was basically like trying to fire at somebody with a hose. Like as you'd move it just wouldn't. It was tough to lead because it was straight fire. Like it's not like you could shift the Gatling gun to aim separately from how you're flying. So point and shoot or fly and shoot isn't really the most effective way to shoot down something.
But at higher speeds, no. Because the A-10, as far as I know, the A-10's like a fly and shoot. Like it shoots where you're going. But the A-10 flies so much slower.
Yeah, it does. And I mean, this flies slow as well, but the A-10, that's a separate animal. We won't get into it. I think it's awesome that they can only shoot for so long. Otherwise, they'll come out of the sky because they slow down too much.
Yeah.
From the recoil. That's fantastic. Anyway, so they were basically there to basically do surveillance and do basically the bomb strafing runs of the front lines and kind of come in after a lot of the faster forces did their initial run. So after the military service, after the war was over, there's a story that the Vietnam basically came in and grabbed, I guess they got control of an airbase that had 33 of these things. And so they took them and they used them for their own purpose and then sold them to all the different countries that needed them. And it turns out that there's a lot of South American countries that then got a hold of these. They got hold of these and then used them in their their wars, specifically in the Salvadoran Air Force during the Salvadoran Civil War. There's nothing on what timeline that is. And I think it was around 1983. And they were used in 1983, that's right, as an anti-narcotic mission in most South American countries. So I don't know. And so if you look at the list of countries, it's basically Korea, North and South, a couple countries in between, and then like all of the South American countries. As a matter of fact, actually almost all the Americas, but mostly South America and United States of America is pretty much who has these. And they're still in service today. That's the crazy part. They stopped production of those in 1975, and they're still in service today. Is it 50 years later?
Well, says they're holding up well.
Apparently. This plane, if you want to check out livery examples, you can go. I'll put a link to the Papercraft. Remember, I told you that I designed the plane based on the paper model. He's got a list of probably, I think it's 10 different liveries. So if you're interested in like how to change what a plane looks like, for example, you've got the Colombian Air Force has like a dragon on the underside. The Republic of Korea it looks like a Thunderbird, like the Thunderbird design on the underside. The Hellenic Air Force, which is from Greece, is kind of a blue with like it looks like a Mercury or some sort of figure on the front. And then you got Portuguese, which is like red with kind of green patches on the wing tops, like green triangle patches on the top. So, I mean, if you look at this list, like the liveries, the way they've been painted up are just so varied and very interesting. I find that it's almost like the shape of this plane lends itself to coming up with something very creative to paint it. If you look through them, you're like, I mean, some of them are pretty straightforward, camo kind of stuff. And some of them are just very interesting, very iconic. One little feature that this craft, it has a lot of interesting features, but two things I think that I'm going to identify is this plane was incredibly easy to maintain. It was designed with maintenance in mind. It has access panels all over the place. I think it was on the order of like 60 or more access points to be able to get to different parts. And they said that the turnaround time on this aircraft was like under 2 hours, which is very, very short time. So that is one of and I think that's part of the reason why it's a big selling point and still being used as a trainer today, is that it's easy to maintain and it's easy to keep running. And one last little feature, because remember, these are little, and they're really small jet engines. The back of them, you'll notice these little thrust deflectors. And you think like, well, what, the actual thrust on the motors is pointed slightly down and slightly outward, outbound, outboard. That's what I'm thinking. But they had thrust reducers or thrust deflectors. And the reason why is because jet engines don't spool up quick. So you're not immediately going to get like a ton of thrust. So if you're coming in to land, you can't come in fast, right? Otherwise you'll roll off the end of your runway. So you have to slow down airspeed wise, but you need to keep the motors spooled up and giving you good thrust. Otherwise, if you need to do another turnaround, you won't be able to. So the thrust deflectors reduce the amount of thrust that comes out and pushes the plane, even though the motors are still pushing out the same amount of thrust. The deflectors reduce how much is actually being pushing the plane as it lands. It slows down. But if for some reason you have to abort and get back into the air, you can close those deflectors, and now you've got your full thrust without having to change the thrust speed on the actual engines.
Okay, and not having to wait for a spool up or for that engine to come back up to speed.
Which you may not have that opportunity if you're in a real pinch. So that's an interesting little feature that I haven't seen many planes identify. So it's a neat little plane really interesting. And honestly, the American Air Force still uses it today. They call it a super tweet, and that's the other thing. It's called a tweet for the purposes. The engines give this high pitch, like whine, like really high pitch, more so than normal. And so when this thing's coming at you, you can hear it coming because it's wee. It's pretty interesting. If you check out a couple of the videos on this craft, you'll hear and you'll be able to tell, like, oh, that's why they called it a tweet. But yeah, I found this craft pretty different than most normal trainer planes, so I thought it was worth bringing out, as I like the unusual craft. And I'm working on. I should be finishing up plans. I'm hoping to do that later this week, and have something that if you wanted to build a super tweet yourself out of foam board, you might be able to reach out on our Discord, and I'll be able to hook you up, I guess.
Well, there we go.
I guess that closes it up. So, Joe, what's on your workbench?
I mean, kind of the same stuff. But really, once the battery charger gets here, which I'm hoping will be by the weekend, hopefully in time, even for the build party. So build party, I'll probably be getting the electronics and all finalized in the Corsair. And then I'll either be building a power pod for the Fogey or continuing to skin the Depron wing.
Okay.
Kind of trying to wrap up those couple projects so I can move on to other exciting things that are coming up that I've talked about.
Okay, good. Yeah. I'm excited about that for you. Me, I'm gonna work it. I feel like a broken record, but that's only because in the last 2 weeks I took a left turn and built three different three different models that I wasn't expecting to do when we talked last time, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I built like I'll call it an FT version of the Prandtl wing, which is kind of like a score glue rather than pull the paper off and mold version of the Prandtl wing, and I was going to try that out, and I've already got it designed and plans, so I'm just going to test to see how well that works. And then I'm going to continue my work on the car plane and the J1000, and I know I'm going to be starting to put together the Texan and the Reptile Dragon 2, the actual foam model that, the professional model, not the foam board version.
Mm-hmm.
The EPP version.
Well, if I time it right, I'll get the Depron wing, the Corsair, and the Fogey all patched up and maidened and flying and all finished up, and you can start your Texan, and I'll be starting the 7 about the same time.
Oh, nice. That sounds good.
Would be ideal.
Yeah.
I know it's a bit of a tall order on my part. I just
you
don't
can do
build
it
as fast as you.
No, I don't know why, but I guess I just have I don't know. I want to see it come together. There's something that I really enjoy about seeing some 2D some idea, and in an hour of rolling and shaping and gluing, it's all of a sudden a plane that flies. Is just still fascinating to me. So, let's see. Are there any things we want to mention? Remind our listeners.
Just a reminder that you're planning to do a build party on the 28th.
Mm-hmm.
I know here you're saying 12 to 2, but I think earlier you said 11 to 2.
11 to 2, yeah.
Eastern time. And I know you'll be there. I may not. I lost some time work-wise over the last week, so I'm probably going to be pulling that Saturday to get caught up.
Well, if any of this talk has got you interested in anything, I know the FT Flight Test has made Commuter, which is basically the Cessna. I think it's the 172. It might have been the 180, but it's basically a Cessna plane. If you're interested in building that, you can look at Flight Test for the Commuter, maybe on their community pages if it's not available. But I think it's a kit. If you are interested in anything having to do with the Super Tweet or the A37 Dragonfly, I'm going to post a bunch of resource links. And if you want to check out any of these other trainer aircraft, we'll have a link to a great resource for you to look up your own trainer craft that inspires you. Go out, build it, fly it, crash it, build it again.
Have a good time with it.
Yeah, have a good time, laugh, and enjoy the hobby. So hopefully that'll get you what you need. Joe, why don't you take us away?
All right. Well, guys, as always, thank you for tuning in and listening. We always appreciate you guys being with us and enjoying the hobby with us. If you have any questions or want to let us know anything going on in your world, feel free to reach out to us. You can email us at aviationrcnoob@gmail.com. Or if you want to message Matthew directly, Matthew@aviationrcnoob.com, or me, Joe@aviationrcnoob.com. And we'll be back next time.
All right, see you next time.
Did you punch your mic?
Kind of. Screw you, Mike. I never liked you anyway. Boo-doo.
Can you hear me?
You there?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yep, I can hear you fine. What are the Russians called nowadays? Soviets?
Today?
Well, yeah, yeah.
Russians. Yep. Interestingly, from December 4th, 1958 to February 7th, 1959, Robert Tim and John Cook set the world record for refueled flight endurance in a used Cessna 172 registration number November Niner 172 Bravo. They took off from McCarran Airfield in Las Vegas, Nevada, and landed back at McCarran Airfield after 64 days, 22 hours, 19 minutes, and 5 seconds in flight. The flight was part of a fundraising effort for Damon Runyon Cancer Fund.
Isn't that pretty neat?
64, almost 65 days in the air.
What?
Yes, that refueled endurance flight. 60.
I don't know. You named the dates, and I wasn't thinking like that's months apart.
65 days
In a Cessna?
in a Cessna in the air.
Oh, for the love of Pete, those poor people. Because I mean, where are you going? I'm sure they figured out like how you're going to go to the bathroom and kind of get fresh. I mean, I suppose people throw themselves up on the billboard platforms for like radio stunts, and they're up there for a while. But I can't even imagine what that must have smelled like. They probably had to hose that whole thing down inside.
I mean, yeah. So they can get air circulating in there. My concern is more, like, so there's a back seat to these things. Like you can modify it and put just an open bottom toilet in there just to poop through.
Well, much like the airliners use. I mean, that's kind of what it effectively is. When you flush, that stuff just drops out. Goron Logon, have you seen that?
Goron Logon, the drill that appears to heaven.
Yeah, so
the whole first half is like you.
It goes downhill from here.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, that's the show for today, guys. Thanks for tuning in to manga, Japanese anime and manga noobs.